His aunt mocked his poverty. Until a Marine general arrived to confirm his royal inheritance. The Caldwell family estate, an edifice of faded grandeur nestled amidst manicured but slightly overgrown gardens, always carried a scent of stale formality. On this late autumn evening, as a biting chill nudged insistently at the windowpanes, the grand dining room was thick with the aroma of roasted lamb, rich and cloying, mingling with the sharper notes of expensive claret and the metallic tang of unspoken resentments. The clinking of heavy silverware against porcelain echoed like tiny, sharp criticisms in the air, a constant counterpoint to the low murmur of conversation. A roaring fireplace attempted to infuse warmth into the cavernous space, but its efforts seemed futile against the icy glares directed at Lysander Thorne. He sat, a quiet, unassuming man of 70, in a worn tweed jacket, its fabric softened by decades of use and care, its simple cut a stark contrast to the shimmering silks and tailored suits adorning his assembled relatives. His presence, an island of understated humility, seemed to disrupt the carefully curated opulence of the room. His aunt, Aggie Caldwell, a woman whose 68 years had been spent meticulously cultivating an image of aristocratic refinement, surveyed him now with undisguised contempt. Every silver hair was perfectly coiffed, every pearl in her necklace perfectly aligned, every line on her face seemingly etched by a lifetime of judgment. Her eyes, sharp and predatory as a hawk's, raked over his simple attire, lingering on the slightly threadbare elbows of his jacket, as if seeking evidence of his perceived destitution. A sneer, practiced and precise, twisted her perfectly manicured lips, revealing just a hint of pearly white teeth. "Lysander, darling," Aggie purred, her voice dripping with a saccharine mock sympathy that barely concealed the venom beneath, "still clinging to those dusty old archives, are we? One would think, at your age, you'd have found something profitable. A hobby, perhaps, that doesn't involve living off the crumbs of your distant, imagined nobility." She paused, allowing her words to hang in the air, weighted with the implied accusation of destitution, a verbal stone cast into the quiet pool of his existence. A few cousins chuckled nervously, their gazes darting away from Lysander, unwilling to meet his steady, calm eyes. They were performers in Aggie's theater, complicit in their silence. Aggie's daughter, Penelope, a younger, more brittle version of her mother, snickered openly, a high-pitched, affected sound, as she adjusted a diamond necklace that seemed almost too heavy for her delicate throat, its brilliance an almost aggressive display. Lysander observed it all, the forced smiles, the feigned disinterest, the uncomfortable shuffling in chairs. He had seen this scene play out countless times before, a familiar, predictable dance. Lysander merely took a slow, deliberate sip of his water, the cool liquid a balm against the simmering tension. His gaze remained steady, devoid of resentment or anger, a quiet pool reflecting the agitated surface of the room. He simply observed, as he always did, a lifetime of quiet contemplation and meticulous observation having honed his perception to a razor's edge. He saw the glint of avarice, cold and calculating, in Aggie's eyes, the performative pity that barely masked her profound scorn. He saw the uncomfortable silence of those who benefited from Aggie's social standing, a silent agreement to her cruelty. And he saw, too, the fleeting shame in the eyes of a few younger relatives who hadn't yet fully succumbed to the family's corrosive materialist ethos, a flicker of humanity in the gilded cage. He wondered, briefly, if any of them truly understood the cost of their complicity. "My dear aunt," Lysander finally spoke, his voice soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried an unexpected resonance in the suddenly silent room, cutting through the clinking and murmuring like a precise blade. "The game, it seems, is finally over." Aggie's laughter erupted, loud and grating, like pebbles rattling in a tin can, shattering the fragile quiet. "Game? Oh, Lysander, you truly are a character. Have you finally given up on your royal fantasies? Decided to face the music of your, shall we say, modest circumstances?" She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a predatory triumph, eager to press her perceived advantage. "Perhaps now you'll finally sell that decrepit little cottage of yours and move into something a bit more befitting." A nursing home, perhaps. Her words were met with more nervous laughter, a symphony of discomfort and complicity, each chuckle a nail in the coffin of his imagined dignity. Lysander, however, simply offered a small, knowing smile, a private amusement playing on his lips. He said nothing more, his gaze drifting towards the heavy oak door at the far end of the room, a subtle signal only he could perceive. A shiver ran through the air, not of cold, but of a quiet, momentous anticipation, a ripple of change that only he seemed to feel. Aggie, still basking in her perceived victory, her self-satisfaction a blinding veil, failed to notice the subtle shift in atmosphere, oblivious to the fact that her nephew's quiet declaration was not one of surrender, but of the impending, irrevocable end of her own carefully constructed, superficial world. To truly understand Lysander Thorne's enigmatic declaration, one had to delve into the quiet solitude of his past, a past he had meticulously crafted and guarded, layer by layer, like a precious manuscript. Lysander was, by nature, an observer, a quiet chronicler of life. From a young age, even amidst the vague whispers of a noble, albeit distant, lineage that permeated his family's history, whispers Aggie always dismissed with a scoff, he found solace not in grand pronouncements or ostentatious displays, but in the quiet contemplation of human nature. He had chosen the unassuming path of an archivist, not out of necessity or a lack of ambition, but out of a genuine, profound love for history, for stories, for the elusive truths hidden within faded documents and forgotten texts. The crumbling parchment, the fragile ink, the forgotten voices of the past, these were his true companions. This profession, however, also granted him a unique vantage point from which to study the intricate, often ugly, web of human ambition and vanity, observing the contemporary world with the same detached, analytical eye he applied to ancient scrolls. His family, particularly his Aunt Agnes, had always been preoccupied with appearances, with the superficial gleam of wealth and status. They were social climbers, each generation striving to outdo the last in increasingly elaborate displays of wealth and manufactured influence. The Caldwell name, once synonymous with old money and quiet dignity, had, under Aggie's stewardship, become synonymous with flashy displays and relentless social maneuvering. Lysander, with his simple tastes, his scholarly pursuits, and his quiet dignity, was an anomaly, a quiet anachronism in their glittering, hollow world. The family's ancestral claims, which Lysander never entirely dismissed but certainly never flaunted, became a source of particular ridicule from Aggie. She saw them as an embarrassing eccentricity, a delusional fantasy of a man too inept to forge his own fortune, a convenient target for her endless barbs. Royal blood, my foot, she'd scoff, her laughter sharp, more like royal dust bunnies in his musty old cottage. He understood then that her mockery wasn't merely aimed at him, but at anything that didn't conform to her narrow, materialistic worldview. Lysander, however, held a profound secret, a hidden truth that underpinned his entire existence. Long ago, a distant relative, a benevolent and far-sighted woman named Lady Eleanor, who had herself been a quiet scholar and believed deeply in the Thorne family's dormant royal heritage, had established a discreet trust. Lady Eleanor, with her profound understanding of human nature, had foreseen the potential for avarice and manipulation within the family. She knew that true character was often revealed not by what one possessed, but by how one was treated when perceived to possess little. Her trust, managed by a highly reputable and equally discreet international consortium of lawyers and financiers, was specifically designed to provide Lysander, as the true heir, with a comfortable, yet understated, living. It allowed him to pursue his intellectual passions without the burden of financial worry, while simultaneously ensuring his lifestyle remained humble enough to deter opportunists and reveal the true intentions of those around him. She wanted Lysander to live a life unburdened by the expectations of wealth, a life where he could observe the world without the distorting lens of material gain, a life where he could truly see. She had even included stipulations that allowed for the anonymous funding of projects and individuals he deemed worthy, a silent testament to her own quiet philanthropy. Lysander, aware of the trust's existence from his early 20s and its profound purpose, embraced the quiet anonymity it afforded him. He watched, with an archivist's meticulousness, as his relatives, particularly Aggie, spiraled deeper and deeper into a materialistic obsession. He witnessed their judgments, their condescension, and their thinly veiled contempt for anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of success. He saw how their smiles broadened for the wealthy and thinned to a grimace for the seemingly poor. This consistent observation slowly eroded his faith in the inherent goodness of many around him, particularly within his own family circle. He began to perceive them as a collection of actors, perpetually performing for an unseen audience, their true selves hidden beneath layers of pretense, their gestures hollow. He understood that his poverty was merely a mirror in which they reflected their own failings. The decision to initiate his test was not a sudden impulse, but a gradual culmination of decades of observing this superficiality, a slow-burning conviction that demanded a final, definitive answer. He wanted to understand if true character, true kindness, still existed beneath the veneers of society, untainted by the lure of gold. He wanted to unmask the true nature of those who claimed to care for him, particularly Aggie, whose constant mockery grated on his quiet dignity not because it hurt him personally, but because it laid bare the utter ugliness of her soul, a stark contrast to the noble heritage she so craved. He understood that true wealth was not measured in gold or titles, but in the richness of one's spirit and the generosity of one's heart. He needed to prove, not to others, but to himself, that his quiet existence had allowed him to see beyond the masks people wore, to discern genuine humanity from its gilded imitation. He needed to confirm that the trust's original intent, to protect him from avarice and allow him to truly see, had been successful. So, Lysander continued his life as the poor recluse. He wore simple, well-maintained clothes, drove an old but reliable vintage car that he cherished for its enduring quality rather than its prestige, and lived in a modest, albeit charming, cottage filled to the brim with books and artifacts, a sanctuary of knowledge and history. He attended family gatherings, always punctual, always polite, always radiating a quiet composure that Aggie mistook for meekness. He allowed himself to be seen as the family's quiet failure, the eccentric uncle who lived in a dream world of dusty old stories. And all the while, he watched, he listened, and he waited. His archivist's mind, accustomed to sifting through layers of history to uncover hidden truths, was now applied to the living, breathing narrative unfolding before him. He was building his case, gathering his evidence, meticulously documenting the human condition in his mental archives. The final reveal would not merely be an act of poetic justice, it would be the culmination of a lifelong study, a grand experiment designed to expose the insidious nature of greed and celebrate the quiet resilience of kindness, a testament to Lady Eleanor's profound foresight. The test that Lysander Thorne had devised was insidious in its simplicity, elegant in its understated power. He merely had to exist as he was, allowing the world, and particularly his relatives, to project their assumptions and prejudices onto him. He observed how the perception of poverty acted as a repellent to some, causing them to recoil in discomfort or disdain, and yet, paradoxically, as a magnet for genuine compassion in others, drawing forth acts of selfless kindness. One frosty Christmas Eve, the Caldwell family gathered for their annual lavish dinner, a glittering pageant of manufactured cheer. The air shimmered with expensive perfumes and the brittle clink of crystal glasses, each sound a tiny echo of their carefully constructed lives. Aggie, resplendent in a sapphire gown that seemed to absorb and reflect every light in the room, surveyed her domain with an air of absolute satisfaction, her posture a testament to her self-importance. Lysander arrived, as always, punctual and composed, bearing a small, carefully wrapped gift for the family, a rare, first-edition book on local history, knowing full well its true value would be dismissed, its intellectual merit lost on a family obsessed with the material. Aggie took the slim volume from his hands, her fingers barely touching his, as if his poverty were a contagious disease that might transfer to her expensive silk. "Oh, Lysander," she sighed, her voice laced with exaggerated patience, a theatrical performance for her audience, "another book? My dear, aren't you worried your cottage will collapse under the weight of all this unread paper? Perhaps a lovely, practical gift next year." Like, say, a donation to a charity that helps less fortunate individuals. She cast a pointed glance at his slightly worn, yet impeccably clean, suit jacket, a subtle jab designed to remind everyone of his perceived lack. Her daughter, Penelope, snickered, her hand rising to cover her mouth in a gesture of feigned politeness that failed to hide her amusement. Her son, Marcus, a lawyer with a penchant for flashy watches and loud ties, feigned interest in his phone, his silence an act of complicity. Lysander simply nodded, offering a small, enigmatic smile, a private acknowledgement of their blindness. He knew the book, a true rarity in its meticulous detail and historical significance, was worth a small fortune, but its value was utterly lost on those who only saw the monetary, not the intellectual. He observed the casual cruelty, the deliberate humiliation, and filed it away in the meticulous archives of his mind, another piece of evidence in his ongoing study. Months later, at a family brunch hosted at a prestigious country club, amidst the clatter of silver and the murmur of polite gossip, Aggie was particularly effusive about her latest philanthropic endeavors. She regaled the table with tales of her generous donations to various causes, subtly highlighting the exorbitant sums she claimed to have given. Lysander, seated quietly at the end of the long mahogany table, listened with a detached amusement. He had, through the discreet trust, anonymously funded several significant projects, including the painstaking restoration of the very library wing Aggie claimed to be so passionately supporting, as well as the complete renovation of the local community center that Aggie often mentioned in passing. He knew her donations were mostly for show, carefully calculated to maximize social prestige and minimize actual financial outlay, often involving the rerouting of funds from other, less public, family assets. And Lysander, Aggie chirped, turning her attention to him with a forced smile, her eyes sparkling with malicious intent, "What causes are you supporting these days? Still saving old manuscripts from oblivion?" She laughed, a brittle, unconvincing sound. "Perhaps you could volunteer to dust the shelves at the local public library. It would be commendable, given your limited means." The subtle sting was intended to remind everyone, yet again, of his perceived lack of financial contribution to society, despite his vast, hidden wealth. Lysander merely smiled, his eyes twinkling with a profound, private irony. "Indeed, Aunt Agnes," he replied, his voice calm and even, "I find great satisfaction in preserving that which is often overlooked. True value, you see, is not always immediately apparent. Sometimes, the most significant treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the discerning eye to uncover them." Aggie, missing the profound irony and the double meaning entirely, simply patted his hand dismissively, her attention already drifting, and turned back to regale her audience with more tales of her fabricated benevolence, completely unaware of the depth of her nephew's silent judgment. There were countless such instances over the years. Aggie would occasionally, with a performative sigh of concern, offer Lysander financial advice, suggesting he invest in sensible ventures, clearly implying he had no money to invest, or offering to handle his finances if he ever found himself truly destitute. She once even tried to help him downsize his cottage, claiming it was too much for an elderly, solitary man to maintain, her true intention being to scout for any valuables she might deem worth acquiring, perhaps even offering a paltry sum for a prized antique she knew little about. Lysander politely declined each offer, his gaze unwavering, a subtle challenge in his eyes that Aggie, blinded by her own avarice, never quite discerned. He noted every subtle probe, every thinly veiled attempt to exploit his perceived vulnerability, and meticulously catalogued them. Yet, amidst this relentless tide of materialism and veiled contempt, Lysander encountered glimpses of genuine human kindness, moments that acted as anchors for his faith in humanity. These moments, like fragile blossoms in a barren landscape, reinforced his belief that not all hearts were corrupted by avarice, that true empathy still existed. One such person was Hilaire Vance, a young woman in her early 20s who worked part-time at the Gilded Page, a quaint little coffee shop and bookstore Lysander frequented. Elara, with her earnest, observant eyes and a perpetually worried crease between her brows, was clearly struggling, perhaps with university fees or family burdens. Her clothes were simple, her posture often tired, yet she possessed an innate grace, a profound empathy, and a quiet dignity that resonated deeply with Lysander. Lysander, dressed in his usual simple attire, would often sit in a quiet corner of the bookstore, observing the patrons, sipping his Earl Grey, losing himself in the scent of old paper and fresh coffee. Elara, despite her own visible struggles, her worn but clean shoes, the slight tremor in her hands when she was particularly tired, the faint shadows beneath her eyes, would always offer him an extra cookie, or insist he take a discount on a new release, claiming it was a staff privilege he deserved for being such a loyal customer. She spoke to him with genuine respect, often engaging him in conversations about the books he read, listening intently to his quiet observations about literature and life, never once hinting at his perceived financial status, never looking down upon his simple clothes. Instead, she seemed to see the quiet wisdom in his eyes, the vast knowledge that resided within him, the depth of his spirit. She saw him, not his circumstances. One particularly rainy afternoon, a sudden downpour had caught Lysander unprepared. He had forgotten his umbrella. Elara, noticing his predicament as he prepared to step out into the deluge, immediately insisted he take hers. "Please, Mr. Thorne," she urged, her voice soft but firm, a genuine concern in her tone, "you'll catch a chill. I can walk, my apartment is just around the corner, and I don't mind the rain." Lysander, deeply touched by her selfless gesture, accepted the umbrella, promising to return it. He saw the genuine concern in her eyes, a stark contrast to the calculating glances of his own family. He noted the slight shiver that ran through her frame as she stepped out into the rain, a testament to her own lack of proper rain gear, and his heart, so long a careful observer, felt a pang of warmth. This small act of kindness, born of genuine concern and devoid of any expectation of reward, solidified Lysander's conviction that goodness still existed in the world, that not all were lost to the siren call of materialism. He later had the discreet trust arrange for Elara's anonymous scholarship application to be accepted at a prestigious university, ensuring her academic future, without her ever knowing the source of her good fortune. He wanted to help her, not as a test, but as a genuine act of gratitude for her pure heart, a silent acknowledgement of the kindness she had shown him when he was perceived to have nothing. Another time, Lysander had been struggling to carry a particularly heavy box of antique books into his cottage, its weight testing his 70 years. A young man, a neighbor he barely knew, immediately dropped what he was doing, he had been tinkering with an old motorcycle in his driveway, and rushed over to assist. "Let me get that for you, sir," the young man offered, his brow furrowed with effort as he easily lifted the box, his young strength a stark contrast to Lysander's. He refused any offer of payment, simply smiling and saying, "Happy to help, Mr. Thorne. Always good to see a fellow lover of books. Those look like proper treasures." Lysander observed this simple, unasked-for act of strength and neighborliness, noting the stark contrast to his relatives who would barely lift a finger unless there was a clear, tangible benefit involved. He saw the genuine smile, the unburdened generosity, and felt a quiet joy. These small, seemingly insignificant encounters were the true treasures Lysander collected. They were the evidence that his test, while revealing the depths of human avarice and the crushing superficiality of his family, also unearthed the quiet resilience of empathy and genuine kindness. He saw how Aggie's world, built on superficiality and material gain, was a desolate place, devoid of true connection, a gilded cage of her own making. He understood that her constant mockery of his poverty was merely a projection of her own emptiness, her own fear of lacking, a desperate attempt to elevate herself by demeaning others, by stamping out any perceived threat to her carefully constructed hierarchy. He was merely a convenient target, a scapegoat for her own inner turmoil and insecurity. The time for the grand revelation, he realized, was rapidly approaching. The performance was about to reach its crescendo. The atmosphere in the Caldwell dining room was electric, though not yet for the reasons Lysander anticipated. It was the annual family gathering, ostensibly to discuss the future of the family estate, a coded term for Aggie's endless machinations to secure more of the family's dwindling old money for herself, to consolidate her power. Aggie, in a shimmering emerald gown that seemed to pulse with her self-importance, held court at the head of the table, her voice ringing with self-congratulation. She had just finished another scathing commentary on Lysander's frugal lifestyle, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction at his perceived discomfort. "Honestly, Lysander," she sighed dramatically, gesturing with a hand laden with rings that caught the firelight, "you truly are an enigma. How can one live so, meagerly? It simply defies comprehension. Your great-aunt Mildred always said you were different, but I always suspected it was just a polite way of saying lost cause. And as for those ridiculous whispers of royal blood, you'd do better to find a way to pay for your own heating bill than to cling to such fanciful delusions." Her laughter, sharp and dismissive, sliced through the room, a symphony of scorn. Penelope and Marcus joined in, their faces contorted in expressions of smug superiority, their shared contempt a bond. Lysander, however, remained serenely composed, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips, a secret amusement known only to him. He glanced at the heavy oak doors, the same ones he had eyed earlier, a silent signal passing between him and an unseen force, a silent cue for the grand unveiling. Just then, a profound, almost palpable silence descended upon the room. The grand oak doors, usually kept closed and imposing, swung open with a deliberate, echoing creak that seemed to reverberate through the very foundations of the old house. All eyes, drawn by the sudden, unexpected sound, turned towards the entrance. Standing framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the soft autumn light filtering through the hallway window, was an imposing figure. He was a man of impressive stature, his shoulders broad, his bearing exuding an aura of undeniable authority and quiet power. Dressed in a crisply tailored uniform of dark blue, bedecked with an array of gleaming medals and ribbons that seemed to catch and refract the light, he commanded immediate attention. His face, etched with the disciplined lines of years of command, was resolute and unyielding, his eyes sharp and intelligent. This was General Theron Vance of the Marine Corps, a name synonymous with integrity, unwavering duty, and a fearsome reputation for meticulousness. Aggie, momentarily stunned by the unexpected interruption, spluttered, her carefully composed facade cracking. "Excuse me. Who are you? This is a private family gathering." Her voice was laced with indignation, her social order momentarily disrupted. General Vance's voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble, yet it filled the room with an authority that brooked no argument, cutting through Aggie's protestations like a sword through silk. "My apologies for the intrusion, madam. I am General Theron Vance. I am here on a matter of utmost importance concerning the Thorne family lineage, specifically regarding Mr. Lysander Thorne." His gaze, sharp and direct, settled on Lysander, a silent acknowledgment passing between the two men. A collective gasp swept through the room, a wave of disbelief. Lysander's cousins exchanged bewildered glances, their faces etched with confusion. Aggie's jaw dropped, her face paling rapidly, a sickly gray replacing her usual imperious flush. She looked from the imposing general to Lysander, her mind struggling, failing, to reconcile the formidable military figure with her poor, delusional nephew. The very foundations of her perceived reality began to crack. General Vance took a few deliberate, measured steps into the room, his eyes scanning the faces present, lingering for a fraction of a second on Aggie's stunned expression, noting her discomfort. "Members of the Thorne family," he began, his voice solemn and resonant, "for generations, there have been whispers, fragmented documents, and vague claims regarding a branch of your family tree. Specifically, a direct, albeit long-lost, royal lineage. For centuries, this lineage has been deliberately obscured, protected for reasons of historical significance and personal safety, its secrets guarded fiercely by loyal adherents." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink into the stunned silence, for the full weight of his statement to register. Through extensive, confidential research, aided by ancient archives, recently declassified documents from various European governments, and meticulous genealogical tracing across continents, my organization has definitively confirmed these claims. The direct descendant of this ancient royal line, the true heir to a vast, ancestral inheritance, is present in this very room, among you. His eyes fixed on Lysander, a subtle flicker of respect, almost reverence, in their depths. Mr. Lysander Thorne, General Vance declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty, a pronouncement that shattered the room's fragile peace, you are not merely a distant relative of nobility. You are the direct, living heir to the House of Thorne Valerius, a forgotten royal house with ties to the ancient European kingdoms, and by extension, the rightful claimant to an inheritance that spans continents and centuries, an inheritance of unimaginable scale. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and stunned silence, a storm of disbelief and dawning realization. Aggie's face, which had been pale moments before, now flushed crimson with a mixture of rage and humiliation, then drained of color entirely, a ghastly ashen gray. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted wildly between Lysander and the general, her mind desperately searching for a rational explanation, a way to dismiss this impossible truth. General Vance continued, his voice cutting through the rising murmurs, firm and unyielding. This inheritance includes not only vast financial assets, held in discreet international accounts and managed with the utmost discretion for generations, but also extensive historical properties across Europe, a significant portfolio of ancient artifacts, priceless art, and a substantial trust, established generations ago by Lady Eleanor Thorne, specifically to ensure the well-being and security of the true heir, even in anonymity, protecting them from the very avarice that has been so clearly displayed here. He then turned to Aggie, his gaze hardening, his eyes holding a silent accusation. Indeed, this trust has ensured that Mr. Thorne has lived a life of quiet dignity and considerable financial security for decades, unbeknownst to many. His choice to live humbly was precisely that, a conscious choice, madam, not a necessity. It was a means to observe and understand. The implication hung heavy in the air, a devastating blow to Aggie's carefully constructed narrative of superiority and her relentless mockery. Every cruel joke, every mocking comment about Lysander's poverty, every sneer about his delusions, now echoed back, hollow and pathetic, a damning indictment of her own character. The realization hit Aggie with the brutal force of a physical blow. Lysander, the man she had ridiculed, scorned, and humiliated for years, the man she believed to be a financial burden and an embarrassment, was not only fabulously wealthy but had been so all along, living simply by choice, enduring her barbs with quiet fortitude. He had allowed her to expose her true, avaricious nature in the most public and humiliating way possible, to reveal the grotesque core of her being. Her carefully cultivated image shattered, revealing the ugly, grasping greed beneath, a truly repulsive sight. Lysander, observing her complete breakdown, offered no word of triumph, no grand pronouncement, no hint of revenge. He simply met her horrified, disbelieving gaze with his quiet, knowing smile, a testament to his long-held secret, a silent victory. The game, as he had so calmly stated earlier, was indeed over. The masks had fallen, and the true face of avarice was exposed for all to see, raw and unadorned. The aftermath of General Vance's revelation was swift and brutal, particularly for Aggie Caldwell, whose world had imploded in a single, devastating moment. Her initial shock gave way to a grotesque display of desperation, a flailing attempt to grasp at threads of her former reality. Her face contorted, a mask of disbelief and sputtering rage warring with a sudden, sickening realization of her colossal, irreversible miscalculation. No! This is impossible, she shrieked, her voice shrill and unhinged, rising to a desperate crescendo. Lysander, you can't be. You're just a dusty old archivist. This is some elaborate prank, isn't it? Some cruel joke. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched, as if to physically shake the truth out of him. General Vance merely raised an eyebrow, his expression unyielding, his calm a stark contrast to her hysteria. "Madam, the documentation is irrefutable. My organization, with its extensive resources and centuries of validated data, does not engage in pranks or jokes. Mr. Thorne's lineage and the scale of his inheritance are beyond dispute, verified by multiple independent sources." Aggie stumbled forward, her eyes fixed on Lysander, now pleading, her voice a pathetic whine that grated on the ears. "Lysander, darling, you must understand. I was only trying to motivate you. To encourage you to aspire to more. All those jokes, they were just playful banter. You know how I am, always looking out for my family." Her voice, once so full of disdain and cutting sarcasm, was now a pathetic, desperate plea, a transparent attempt to rewrite history, to erase years of cruelty with a few flimsy words. She reached out, as if to grasp his arm, to pull him back into her orbit, but Lysander subtly shifted, his gaze unwavering, betraying neither anger nor forgiveness, only a profound, almost clinical, observation of her rapid disintegration. "Indeed, Aunt Agnes," Lysander finally spoke, his voice calm and clear, cutting through her pleas like a surgeon's scalpel, each word precise and devastating. "Your playful banter has been quite illuminating. It has clearly demonstrated the true measure of your character, and the character of those who chose to echo your sentiments. And for that, I am, in a way, quite grateful. You have provided a most valuable education." The quiet dignity in his words, the subtle sting of his gratitude for her unwittingly exposing herself, was far more devastating than any angry outburst could have been. It was a polite, unyielding dismissal, a sentence passed without fanfare. The other relatives, previously complicit in Aggie's mockery or simply too intimidated to intervene, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and dawning fear. Some averted their eyes, unable to meet Lysander's calm gaze, ashamed by Aggie's pathetic display. Others, realizing the enormity of Lysander's true status, now looked at him with a mixture of awe and dawning regret, calculating the opportunities they had squandered through their own blindness. Marcus, Aggie's son, tried to interject, stammering, his usual bravado evaporated, "Uncle Lysander, we never meant any disrespect. Mother she has a strong personality. She means well." His words sounded hollow even to his own ears. General Vance interceded, his voice firm and unwavering, a final gavel. "This matter is now concluded. Mr. Thorne's affairs will be managed by a dedicated team. Any further harassment, attempts to exploit his newly confirmed status, or frivolous legal claims will be met with the full force of legal action and swift international recourse." His gaze swept over the room, a clear, unmistakable warning that silenced all further protests. Aggie, her face ashen, her emerald gown now seeming grotesque, collapsed into a chair, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her in a spectacular cascade of ruin. Her social standing, meticulously built on the illusion of inherited wealth and her perceived moral and financial superiority, was now in tatters. The very people she had sought to impress, the social elite she had clawed her way to join, now saw her as a grasping, cruel hypocrite. Over the following weeks, the whispers spread like wildfire through their social circles, amplified by the sensational news of Lysander's true identity. Invitations dwindled. Her calls went unanswered. The investments she had made, leveraging her reputation and expecting Lysander's eventual financial collapse to clear her own mounting debts, began to unravel as creditors lost faith in her once unshakable facade. Her avarice, once her perceived strength, became her undoing, a self-inflicted wound. She was, in essence, socially and financially ruined, a pariah in the very circles she had so desperately sought to dominate, consumed by the emptiness she had always cultivated. Meanwhile, Lysander, having calmly navigated the immediate aftermath of the revelation, turned his attention to those who had shown him genuine kindness, those rare individuals who had seen beyond the surface. His primary focus was Alara Vance. He had learned through the trust's discreet inquiries about her financial struggles, her desperate attempts to fund her education while caring for an ailing parent, her quiet sacrifices. He knew she faced eviction from her small apartment, and that her parents' medical bills were overwhelming her. A few days after the public revelation, Elara was working her shift at the Gilded Page, looking particularly weary, the shadows beneath her eyes more pronounced than usual. Lysander walked in, not in his usual simple tweed, but in a well-tailored, albeit still understated, suit of fine wool, a subtle shift that spoke of newfound means but retained his inherent humility. Elara, surprised by his changed appearance, yet unaffected by the swirling rumors about his identity, greeted him with her usual warmth and genuine smile. "Mr. Thorne. You look very distinguished today. Did you have an important meeting?" Lysander smiled gently, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Elara, I have something for you. A small matter of business, if you will allow me." He handed her a large, heavy envelope, sealed with a formal wax stamp. Inside, her trembling fingers found a stack of documents, a deed to a charming, fully paid-for house in a quiet, leafy neighborhood known for its excellent schools and community spirit, and a letter confirming a fully funded scholarship to the prestigious university of her choice, covering all expenses for her and ensuring her parents' medical needs were met without financial strain, including long-term care. The letter explicitly stated that the benefactor wished to remain anonymous, citing only a grateful admirer of quiet virtues. But Elara's eyes darted to Lysander, a dawning realization, profound and overwhelming, blooming on her face. Her hands trembled as she clutched the documents, her face paling then flushing with emotion. "Mr. Thorne, what is this? I don't understand. This is too much." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the elegant script. "It is a small token of gratitude, Elara," Lysander said, his voice soft, filled with a quiet satisfaction. "For your kindness. For seeing a man, not his perceived circumstances. For the umbrella, for the extra cookie, for your genuine conversations, for simply being a good soul in a world that often forgets the value of such things. You, Elara, embody true wealth." He revealed no more about his true identity, allowing the anonymity to preserve her dignity and the purity of her gratitude. He simply wished to reward a genuinely kind heart, to provide a foundation for a life of purpose and peace. Elara, overwhelmed, could only nod, tears streaming down her face, her voice choked with emotion. She knew, without a doubt, that this quiet, unassuming man, now transformed, was her anonymous benefactor, her silent guardian angel. Her life, previously a relentless struggle against overwhelming odds, was now filled with the boundless possibilities she had only ever dreamed of. It was a stark, beautiful contrast to Aggie's self-inflicted downfall, a testament to the enduring power of compassion. Months passed, and the dust settled, though the tremors of Lysander Thorne's revelation continued to reverberate through the social circles of the Caldwell family, a perpetual reminder of their folly. Lysander, now officially Lysander Thorne, Marquess of Thorne Valerius, had embraced his new responsibilities with the same quiet dignity, meticulous attention to detail, and unwavering integrity that he had applied to his life as an archivist. His life had changed externally, certainly. He lived in one of his ancestral estates, a grand, sprawling manor in the European countryside that he was carefully restoring, filling its ancient halls not with gaudy displays of wealth, but with rare books, historical artifacts, and vibrant works of art, curated with the eye of a true connoisseur. He had assembled a team of experts, historians, conservators, financial advisors, and philanthropists, to manage his vast holdings, ensuring that his immense wealth was used not for ostentation or personal indulgence, but for preservation, genuine philanthropy, and meaningful, sustainable investment in the future. He established foundations for historical preservation, funded educational initiatives for underprivileged scholars, quietly supported numerous artists and cultural institutions, and became a silent patron of libraries and museums across the globe. He found immense satisfaction in knowing that his wealth was now a force for good, a tool for enlightenment and positive change, a legacy he was proud to build. He continued his simple habits, his quiet mornings with a cup of Earl Grey, his long walks through the estate's sprawling, ancient gardens, his hours spent poring over ancient texts in his vast private library. The titles and riches had not corrupted his spirit, they had merely amplified his capacity for benevolence, giving him the means to enact the quiet changes he had always wished for. He was still, at his core, the same observant, unassuming man, now with the profound means to effect profound change in the world. He received letters of gratitude from scholars and institutions around the world, and his name began to be spoken with reverence in academic and philanthropic circles, a far cry from the dismissive whispers and snide remarks that once followed him. Aggie Caldwell's fate, however, was a cautionary tale, a stark lesson in the corrosive nature of avarice. Stripped of her social standing and her illusory wealth, her carefully constructed world shattered, she found herself isolated, bitter, and utterly alone. Her frantic, desperate attempts to ingratiate herself with Lysander were met with polite, firm rejections, each one a subtle but powerful barrier. Her former friends, once eager for her invitations and her social influence, now actively avoided her, finding her desperation, her thinly veiled avarice, and her public humiliation utterly repulsive. Her financial schemes collapsed entirely, leaving her reliant on the meager charity of her children, Penelope and Marcus, who themselves suffered from the social fallout of their mother's public humiliation. Aggie, once the queen of appearances, became a bitter recluse, trapped in her own web of deceit and unfulfilled desire, haunted by the ghost of what she had lost. She had everything she had truly desired, wealth and status, yet her ruthless, unkind pursuit of it had left her with nothing but emptiness and regret. She never truly understood the lesson, never once reflected on her own actions, choosing instead to blame Lysander for her downfall rather than her own inherent character flaws. Hilaire Vance, on the other hand, flourished, a vibrant testament to the power of kindness. The quiet house Lysander provided became more than a residence, it was a home, a sanctuary where she and her parent found peace, security, and the space to heal and thrive. The scholarship allowed her to pursue her dreams without the crushing burden of financial worry, lifting a weight she had carried for years. She excelled in her studies, graduating with honors, and eventually embarking on a promising career in social justice, always remembering the quiet kindness that had changed her life, always carrying its spirit forward. She often thought of Mr. Thorne, never quite knowing the full extent of his royal lineage or his vast wealth, but always deeply grateful for his profound generosity, for his belief in her. She knew, intrinsically, that he had seen beyond her struggles and recognized her true spirit, a reciprocal act of quiet observation and genuine empathy that had transformed her life. Lysander, watching from afar as Hilaire built her new life, as she contributed meaningfully to the world, felt a profound sense of peace and vindication. He had found what he sought, confirmation that true value lay not in material possessions, nor in grand titles, but in the unseen qualities of the heart, compassion, integrity, genuine kindness. He had exposed the hypocrisy of those who judged by appearances and rewarded the genuine kindness that shone through adversity, a quiet beacon in an often dark world. The world, in its grand, intricate dance of human lives, often hides its greatest treasures in the most unassuming corners, beneath layers of dust and disregard. For it is not in the glittering light of ostentatious prosperity, but in the deepest shadows of adversity and the quiet simplicity of a humble life, that true character is revealed, stripped bare of pretense. And as Lysander Thorne had unequivocally proven, kindness, however small and seemingly insignificant, always finds its own magnificent reward, rippling outward in unexpected ways, while avarice, however grand and all-consuming, ultimately consumes itself, leaving only a bitter residue of emptiness and regret. If you were captivated by Lysander's journey and Aunt Aggie's shocking downfall, you're in the right place. Our channel is filled with more true stories of hidden identities, poetic justice, and incredible transformations. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another captivating tale. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What was your most surprising moment in Lysander's story? Did you predict Aggie's true nature, or were you shocked by her reaction? And what do you think is the most important lesson we can learn from Lysander's quiet wisdom? Share your thoughts in the comments below.